This is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. I hope you enjoyed this Critical Thought, your daily discussion on game design. Welcome to today's Critical Thought. As always, before we get going, thank you to 896 subscribers here on the YouTube channel. Hope everyone's enjoying the content. For those first timers, be sure to like and subscribe, as we are very close to 900, and then we make our move up to 1,000. Before we get going with the Critical Thought, the lighting may be a little bit different for this video. I put in one of my LED light bulbs above to see how things look. So I've noticed for some of my videos I'm either on the dark side or it's too bright and stuff like that. I've been trying to get the lighting just right. So let me know what you think. Is this kind of brightness good enough? Did you like the ones from previous videos more? Let me know in the comments. Also, if you haven't checked it out yet, be sure to give a watch to my 3-hour discussion with Rob the Swan. We did this live on Twitch and it's now recorded here on YouTube, as well as the start of my Book of Demons Let's Break. Other than that, let's begin with our critical thought, and that's going to be talking about gear progression and how it's becoming sort of the new standard for modern MMOs. This is based on the post, which should be right there at the moment. And gear progression is kind of a switch of what we see traditionally in the MMO market. Many classic MMO designs, such as World of Warcraft, EverQuest, and a lot of the early 1000 MMOs, featured very big leveling curves. We're talking level 60, 70 plus kind of things. And I know right now, I think World of Warcraft has a level cap of 110 with the latest expansion. And what this was designed around was to give players a very lengthy journey to get to the end game. And this is used, again, for that treadmill and keeping you invested. And it works, but the problem is that most MMOs don't have the content or the mechanics to sustain themselves for 60, 70, 80 levels, at least at the start. What we're seeing with modern MMOs is that instead of a focus on leveling, it becomes a focus on gear as a form of progression. And it's being done by using a sense of gear rating, or GR, which we'll refer to for this post, or for this video. Gear rating is essentially an extension of the loot table design that we see in ARPGs and any game where loot is either randomly or procedurally generated. What happens is once the player hits the top level, the loot variety or the loot quality continues to go up. The Division over there is probably one of the cleanest or most overt examples of this. When you hit level 30 in the game, all the loot now has a gear rating. And the gear rating is tied to the world tier, or kind of the world difficulty that you can set the game as. And what the gear rating does is essentially act as both a form of progression and as another means of measurement for loot table design. For instance, in the Division, you could find 2 gloves. One could be gear rating 80, one could be gear rated 150. And the 150 gloves, even though it may be the same style, will have vastly different stats. And we also saw this with games like DC Universe Online, and I believe Titanfall does this as well, but I don't have first-hand knowledge on that. And what this does is, instead of, again, letting players level up over so many hours of playing, they keep the leveling curve low and then put all the progression onto the gear. So the actual mechanics and learning the game happens relatively quickly. And then you're going to spend the majority of your time getting ever better gear, ever rarer gear, and of course becoming all powerful on that front. And there are explicit advantages and disadvantages to this kind of design. The big advantage, as we just said, is reducing the level cap. Like I said, World of Warcraft right now has 110 levels of going up. I remember when I was playing this in 2004, I think there was only 60 at that time. And this kind of a vastly lengthy level curve can definitely wear out its welcome. Again, you're going to pretty much find how you're going to build your class after maybe 20 or 30 levels for those kinds of RPGs. The rest of the time, it's simply optimization and again, the loot hunt. The other problem is, let's say you want to try out another class. Well, you're not exactly going to take a hunter and get back to where you were. You're going to spend another who knows how many hours grinding out those levels until your hunter is the same as your other class, and then repeat for everyone else. But with a focus on gear ratings instead of leveling, it allows you to have that very shortened level curve. The Division goes up to level 30, and I think DC Universe Online does the same thing. And what this means is that there is not a lot of time wasted or punishment for trying something new. With the Division, because there's no such thing as classes, as long as I find a new weapon, I can try something else new. If I want to be a shotgunner, let me grab a shotgun. Assault rifle, the same thing. With DC Universe Online, while there are a lot of different ways to build your classes, with only a level 30 cap, it will be very quickly to get back up there if you want to try something else. And this also allows it to be a lot easier on the designer when it comes to expanding content. Because the level cap is so short, you have a very good idea of the skill levels and kind of the expertise of your players when they hit level 30. When we're talking about games with, 100 levels of experience, talents, bonuses, you name it, it becomes a lot harder to design interesting challenges around that wide variety. It's why a lot of MMOs feature, the typical raid content where you're going after very high level, very high stat heavy enemies. The other advantage of a gear rating system is that, as we talked about in a previous critical thought, when it works, it can lead to almost an infinite amount of progression, because all we're dealing with are stats and raising numbers. If the highest gear rating was 220, well, let's release a new DLC and bump it up to 400. Or 500, or let's just keep going every month, let's raise it up another 100. And if the game is good enough, you basically have infinite progression. But, as I'm sure most of you are aware after saying that, there is a pretty big problem with that, which we'll come back to in a second. With this kind of progression curve, because the gear is always growing, it also allows you to do more with it. By, let's say when we get to gear tier 300, let's make all of our gear have an additional talent, or an additional modifier, or anything. It makes it a lot easier in terms of designing new content because the player's level is never going to change at this point. You know again what the baseline abilities and stats. And at this point, all that's left is just growing the loot and making it more interesting. Of course, Diablo 3 has done this in some small scale with the ancient modifier, and of course new sets that they add in, usually with every season or so. So all this sounds great, but there are a few major problems that you have to keep in mind. The first is that, quite frankly, this is artificial progression. Like I said, the player's not going to be growing or changing because of the low level cap, and again due to the limits of the mechanics. So what this means is that the search for more loot isn't really all that gratifying. We're doing the same thing over and over again. We're just dealing with more numbers. Instead of doing 800 to 1,000 damage, now we're doing 1,500 to 800, or 1,500 to 1,800. But what I'm doing is not changing. The other point is that this can lead to some very big peaks and valleys in terms of growing. In that example up there, it's kind of hard to make out, but let me explain what is happening in that picture. The gun that I'm using right now, which has the little like gray bracket to the left of it, has a gear rating of 100 and let me see if I can actually make out my that own scene. Let's say that's gear rating 182. Or I'm sorry, let's make that gear 112. The gun that I have highlighted right now, the purple one, has a gear rating of, let's say, it's 182 for the yellow one, 142 for the purple. So that purple gun is actually better for me in terms of stats. It's going to give me more damage. But because the gear rating is lowered, it will actually hurt my score and hurt my overall level in terms of progression because of that. And this is the problem with this kind of gear rating system. It becomes a very abstract means of gating progression. DC Universe Online, when I played, was very guilty of this. What they did was the different endgame content and missions were locked to specific gear ratings. So let's say the first raid event has a gear rating of 1100. And when I get to the level cap with all my best gear, let's say my gear rating's only 900. Well, guess what? I can't start the end game yet until I get 200 more points of gear rating. And that could be by just finding who knows what while I'm going out in the world. I could find a better arm gauntlet that gives me 20 more points. Maybe a chest piece that gives me 75. The point is I'm kind of stuck. Now with this kind of progression, like I said, we could have a peak. Let's say I go on a mission and oh my god, this boss drops an epic item that gives me 400 points of gear rating. Now I can do that endgame content. But then, of course, once that's done, I'm going to need maybe 800 more points to do the next one. So it's back to the grind and hoping that I get those points. And the Division is also like that. In order to go up the world tier system, it features absolutes. So if I'm at 159 gear rating and the next tier is at 160, guess what? I can't go on until I get that one more point. And once you get into like the middle of it, it becomes a lot easier to get gear as the loot tables get progressively stronger. But at the start, it can be a major pain to do it. This is why for a lot of games that do gear ratings, it's very important to have a secondary means of getting this loot. Maybe a high-end vendor that becomes unlocked, or a colossal money sink or crafting sink you can use to supplement your gear. Let's say I cannot find new gloves. So I can go to the high-end vendor and let's say spend who knows how much money and get gloves that are comparable in gear rating. And again, once I find better gloves, I can get rid of those and we keep going up the gear rating. And you definitely need to have that. Now, the other problem with this is that, quite frankly, there's nothing new happening in this game. Again, the point about stats and the treadmill curve like that is that there's always more numbers. You know, get loot that gives you higher numbers to make more numbers go up, so you can get better loot that makes even more numbers go up. And it works for, you know, social games, free-to-play games, of course MMOs, but there's a limit to that. The Division right now is definitely guilty of this. They've spent so much time with 1.4 that they haven't had a chance to add more endgame content. So right now, I'm at the top of the gear rating, and there's nothing more for me to do. I can do Dark Zone runs, I can go on daily quests, but I'm not going to find gear that's going to be colossally different. It may be the difference of, let's say, 10, 20 more points of armor here, 5 to 10 more points of damage. I'm basically done. And the same problem can be said of Diablo 3. Once you get to the end game and get your preferred set gear and you get the ancient variant, what else is left to do? You have 10, at this moment, 10 levels of torment, but you're not fighting new enemies or doing new things. Again, it's just simply raising stats. And the numbers quest has a limit. This is why there needs to be consistent new content. It's what almost killed DC Universe at launch when they were promising expansion level content once a month. World of Warcraft gets away with this because their expansions are so meaty that they add, so much stuff in between that they don't need a consistent, every month a brand new raid. But with MMOs like The Division, DC Universe Online, and other ones, there has to be consistent content because there has to be something to do with this gear or people are going to get tired of it. For me right now, until there's more stuff, I may just put the Division on the back burner for now. I would love to try Destiny to see what it's grown, but I don't have access to an Xbox One or PS4 at the moment. But we're going to wrap up today's critical thought here. For those of you watching, what do you think about this change in progression? Do you think a game could get away with having only, let's say, 20 levels of experience and then putting everything on the gear rating? Do you like the gear rating system? Like I said, it can be polarizing, and when it's done right, it provides a very solid foundation. But as we just talked about, there are some obvious risks. But that's going to do it. So, as always, thank you so much for watching, and thank you to everyone who is liking and subscribing to Game Wisdom. When we hit 900, that means we'll have possibly another vote, and as a little surprise, I've got another gift for everyone once we hit 1,000. I'm not going to tell you what it is until we get there, but it's going to be another little way of saying thank you. One last thing before we get going. What we're doing right now on the Twitch channel while we're waiting for new games to come out, I'm currently going through Mercenary Kings and possibly Bionic Commando Rearmed. So if you'd like to see those games early before they get diced up and made into decent sized chunks here on the YouTube channel, be sure to hop onto the Twitch stream, that's GW Bycer, to check all that stuff out. So with all that said, thanks for watching this critical thought. I am still Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. Be sure to come back tomorrow for more great content here and on GameWisdom.com. And be sure to let me know if the lighting is any better or worse for you with this video. Anyway, see you all tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoy it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and of course share with your friends. It always helps out. For daily posts on all manner of game design and industry topics, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the site and everything that I do, be sure to check out the Patreon campaign. If we can hit goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy, and I'll be able to support myself and my household. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day and random thoughts from me. And lastly, you can find me on Twitch right over there at GWBycer for daily streams most nights around 10 Eastern. Thanks again for watching the video, and be sure to check out more great content coming to the Game Wisdom channel real soon.